They thought it was over when the gavel dropped, when the case was closed, the suspect walked free, or the body was never found. But in the darkest corners of justice, some truths refuse to stay buried. These 5 chilling true crime stories peel back the mask of normalcy, revealing secrets too disturbing for daylight. From cold-blooded setups to vanished killers, each tale spirals deeper into the void where morality breaks and monsters thrive. Proceed carefully. Truth isn't always what it seems. The vanishing of Marla Webb. The town of Cedar Grove was the kind of place where people didn't lock their doors. Tucked into the hills of western Oregon, its biggest excitement was the annual pumpkin fair or the high school's Friday night football game. But in the spring of 1998, everything changed when 17-year-old Marla Webb vanished without a trace. It was an ordinary Tuesday. Marla had stayed after school to finish a ceramics project. Her mother, Deborah Webb, remembered waving to her daughter from the kitchen window as she left for school that morning. She had that red backpack with the "Smashing Pumpkins" patch on it. I remember thinking it was finally warm enough for her to wear her favorite denim jacket. Marla never came home. Her bicycle was found the next morning in a ditch on County Road 14, the front wheel bent and spinning slowly. No signs of a struggle. No blood. No witnesses. The Webb family reported her missing that same night, but local police initially treated it as a runaway case. Marla was a quiet, thoughtful teenager, not rebellious, but introspective. She wrote poetry, played acoustic guitar, and had recently been rejected by a college she dreamed of attending. Authorities speculated she may have left on her own. Deborah never believed that. She left her cat. She left her guitar. If Marla ran away, she would have left a note. She always wrote notes for everything. 2 weeks later, the case officially turned into a missing persons investigation. Flyers with Marla's face papered the town. Her friends, including her closest classmate Hannah Flores, organized a community search. "We combed through the woods, fields, even the old train tunnels," Hannah said. But there was just nothing. For over 2 decades, Marla Webb's case sat cold. Leads dried up. Her face faded from bulletin boards and news stories. That was until 2019, when Detective Carrie Lund took over the Cedar Grove Cold Case Unit. A former forensic analyst turned investigator, Lund had a reputation for solving long-forgotten cases using modern technology. Marla's file was one of the first she pulled. It didn't sit right, Lund later told reporters. The timeline had holes. And there was almost no investigation into the family beyond the initial interviews. Re-examining the case files, Lund focused on the last person to see Marla alive, her stepfather, Glenn Vickers. At the time, he told police Marla had returned home briefly after school to grab her sweater, then left for a ride around the neighborhood before dinner. But the original file had no corroborating evidence for that claim. No neighbors saw her, and no sweater was ever recovered. Even stranger, Glenn had declined a polygraph test and had a prior arrest for domestic assault from before his marriage to Deborah. Lund dug deeper. She submitted a swab of hair from Marla's brush, kept miraculously preserved in the evidence archive, for familial DNA comparison, hoping to trace any links in the system. The results were uneventful. But the real breakthrough came from something far more mundane, a box of journals found in the attic of the Webb family home during a renovation. Deborah had recently moved out and called the department after discovering them. Inside were 4 spiral notebooks filled with Marla's handwritten entries. Most were typical teenage thoughts, about boys, about feeling isolated, about college rejections. But in the final entries from April 1998, Marla described feeling watched. She wrote about someone sneaking into her room when she was asleep. One entry read, "I woke up to my door cracked again. I swear I closed it. Mom never believes me when I say Glenn is weird around me." Lund confronted Glenn Vickers, now living 2 counties away and working as a mechanic. Initially, he stuck to his original story. But confronted with the journals and inconsistencies in his alibi, he cracked. In a taped confession, he admitted to confronting Marla the day she disappeared. According to his account, they argued after she accused him of entering her room uninvited. He claimed the confrontation turned physical when she tried to run away, and she hit her head on the edge of a brick planter outside. Panicked, he said he placed her in his truck and buried her near a closed-off hiking trail. A search team found Marla's remains exactly where he described. The red backpack, faded and weather-worn, was found just feet away, still with a notebook of poetry zipped inside. The town of Cedar Grove was shaken to its core. The man who had stood beside Deborah for years during candlelight vigils, who had wept on camera begging for Marla's return, had killed her all along. Deborah, broken but resolute, later said, "He wore my daughter's pain like a mask to hide his guilt." Glenn Vickers was charged with second-degree murder and interfering with a corpse. His trial began in 2021, ending in a conviction and a sentence of 25 years to life. He never showed remorse. Detective Lund received a departmental commendation for her work on the case. But for her, the reward was quieter. "It wasn't about solving a mystery," she said. "It was about giving a girl her name back. A truth. A resting place." Today, a memorial bench sits outside Cedar Grove High School with a plaque that reads, "In memory of Marla Webb, a voice that will never fade." The motel murders. On the surface, the deaths seemed random. 5 people found dead in 5 different motels across 3 states over the span of 7 months in 2005. Each victim appeared to have no known connection to the others. No common motive. No obvious pattern. But buried in the case files, police missed what would later become chillingly clear: they were all murdered by the same hand. It began in March, in Flagstaff, Arizona. A traveling salesman named Henry Merton was found strangled with a phone cord in room 12 of the Pinecrest Motel. Nothing appeared stolen, and no fingerprints were recovered from the scene. The desk clerk told police he remembered Henry checking in alone and keeping to himself. The investigation stalled, classified as a possible robbery gone wrong. 6 weeks later, in Gallup, New Mexico, a 24-year-old waitress named Linda Pierce was found dead in her room at the Desert View Inn. She'd checked in after a fight with her boyfriend. Her cause of death: blunt force trauma to the head. Her purse, cash, and jewelry were untouched. A cleaning lady found her the next morning, her body propped up neatly in the corner, her shoes placed beside the bed. Then came the third body. In Durango, Colorado, a retired trucker named Roland Spivey was discovered dead from a stab wound to the chest. He'd been staying at the Roadrunner Motel, a cheap strip motel off the highway. The coroner noted something odd: the position of his body mirrored that of the previous victim, back against the wall, legs folded, hands on his lap. Police began to take notice. Still, without forensic evidence, the deaths remained classified as isolated incidents. That changed when journalist Dana Kroll from a local Albuquerque paper received an unmarked envelope containing a single-page letter. Typed, "No return address." It read, 3 of 5. Do you see it yet? The ones who won't be missed. Motel to motel. Like they don't matter. But they do to me. Dana brought the letter to the police, who quickly looped in the FBI. The killer had officially announced himself, and suggested more deaths were coming. In an unusual move, the FBI allowed Dana to stay involved in the investigation as an external consultant, owing to her contact with the killer. They reviewed the motel footage from the nights surrounding each murder. But grainy black and white security cameras from budget motels offered little. In each case, a figure in a hoodie could be seen passing through the lobby, but never clearly enough to identify. The 4th victim was found in July. A drifter named Corey Wheeler, known locally as a handyman and drinker, was discovered in a Las Vegas, New Mexico motel, dead from a single gunshot wound to the chest. The room was locked from the inside, and the bullet casing had been wiped clean. Same body placement. Same eerie staging. And once again, a letter was delivered to Dana Kroll, this time with a detail that wasn't public. Corey asked me to end it. I gave him peace. He smiled. Suddenly, the working theory shifted. Was the killer targeting people he believed wanted to die? Or was this his delusion? Each victim had a troubled background, estranged families, mental health struggles, histories of isolation. The press began calling the suspect the Motel Mercy Killer. Then the 5th body surfaced. In September, a young man named Felix Arroyo was found dead in a roadside inn in Moab, Utah. But unlike the others, Felix had a family, a girlfriend, and no history of hardship. His death, strangulation again, broke the killer's pattern. Or so it seemed. This time, the FBI caught a break. A gas station across from the motel had a high-res security camera. It caught a clear shot of a license plate as a tan 1997 Dodge Caravan pulled into the lot just hours before Felix's estimated time of death. The plates matched a vehicle owned by a man named Norman Teller. Teller, 42, was a former motel manager turned transient. He had a string of low-level offenses, including trespassing, harassment, and illegal firearm possession. When agents raided the storage unit he had been renting, they discovered a chilling collection: motel keycards, newspaper clippings, and a journal titled Room by Room. The journal contained handwritten entries, each describing a murder in grotesque, intimate detail. The pages referred to victims not by name, but by descriptors: the salesman, the girl who cried in her sleep, the man who lost his wife. In each, Teller described offering them peace, as if he were doing them a favor. But there was no mercy in the autopsy reports, only calculated, controlled violence. Teller was arrested in late October and charged with 5 counts of murder. At his trial, he sat silently, refusing to speak, smile, or even look at the prosecution. A forensic psychologist determined that Teller likely suffered from a severe personality disorder combined with a savior complex, falsely believing he was rescuing people from misery. Prosecutors read journal excerpts aloud to the courtroom. One page read, "They look at me like they're begging. Even if they don't say the words. I know who wants to go. And I send them gently." There was no remorse, no apology, just cold, distorted justification. Teller was convicted on all counts and sentenced to life without parole. He is currently held in a maximum security facility in Colorado. Journalist Dana Kroll later published a book about the case titled The Ones Who Won't Be Missed. In interviews, she said what haunted her most wasn't just the murders, but how easily the victims were forgotten before anyone realized they were connected. The truth is, some lives are lived so far off the radar that even in death, no one asks the right questions. Teller understood that. He counted on it. The motel murders weren't about mercy. They were about power. The power to decide who gets remembered, and who disappears quietly into the walls of a cheap motel, their story nearly lost forever. The Cold Trail of Officer Reyes. Officer Daniel Reyes was supposed to be patrolling the east side of Brookhaven on the night of October 19, 2011. At 11:47 p.m., his last radio transmission reported a routine traffic stop on Maple Street. By 12:32 a.m., another officer found Reyes slumped in his cruiser outside an abandoned auto shop. The engine was still running. The driver's side window was down. Officer Reyes was dead, shot once in the head with his own service weapon. At the time, the Brookhaven Police Department called it suicide. An internal memo released to the press cited personal stressors, lack of signs of struggle, and weapon trajectory as indicators. The town mourned quietly. Reyes was eulogized as a kind, devoted officer and loving father of 2. Case closed. But Maria Reyes, his widow, never believed it. Danny loved his kids more than anything. He was planning their Christmas trip. He had just bought a new tent for camping. He wasn't depressed, he was scared. Of something. She knew because in the weeks leading up to his death, Daniel had been acting different. Paranoid. Distant. He often stared out the window at night, and once, Maria found him wiping fingerprints off his car steering wheel. When she asked why, he simply said, "They're watching me." Maria pressed the department for more information. She filed requests for body cam footage, radio logs, and access to her husband's last known assignments. Most of the requests were denied or returned incomplete. Missing data, they said. She started documenting everything: notes, call logs, even Danny's old journals. It wasn't until 5 years later, in 2016, that the tide began to turn. Brookhaven formed a civilian-led oversight board following a string of misconduct scandals within the police department. Maria submitted a formal appeal to reopen her husband's case. A new investigator, Lieutenant Celeste Rowe, was assigned to review it. Rowe had a reputation for following facts over politics. What she found was disturbing. First, the ballistic report from 2011 had major inconsistencies. The shot that killed Reyes entered through the left temple. But Daniel Reyes was right-handed. The angle was awkward, almost implausible for a self-inflicted wound. Second, there were no traces of gunpowder residue on his dominant hand, an almost impossible omission if he had fired the weapon himself. Then came the biggest discovery. Officer Reyes's body camera footage from the night of his death had been logged as unavailable due to hardware failure. But a duplicate archive, quietly kept by a retiring evidence tech, contained a partial backup. Lieutenant Rowe retrieved the corrupted file and sent it to a forensic data lab. The recovered footage was incomplete, just under 6 minutes, but explosive. It showed Daniel during his final stop. He approaches a black SUV with tinted windows parked in the alleyway, not a routine traffic stop as reported. His tone is cautious. "You can't be back here. This is private property. I need to see your ID." There's muffled conversation. Then Daniel says something barely audible. "I told you I'm not doing this anymore." Seconds later, the camera shakes. A shadow moves across the dash. Daniel turns, startled. Then static. The file cuts off. Armed with the footage, Rowe subpoenaed department dispatch logs and discovered a string of unscheduled patrol shifts assigned to Daniel in the weeks leading up to his death, shifts not approved through official channels. According to internal memos, Reyes had been working with an undercover narcotics task force, but there was no formal record of his role, no task force logs, and no supervisory oversight. A name surfaced repeatedly in Reyes's notes: Santos. Further digging revealed that Luis Santos was a known drug informant with ties to the La Familia cartel. He had served as a paid source for Brookhaven PD and was known for both his connections and volatility. Reyes had allegedly been using Santos to gather intel on local trafficking cells. But somewhere along the line, something went wrong. In January 2017, Luis Santos was found dead in a motel outside Tulsa. Shot execution style. With Santos gone and Reyes dead, the trail seemed cold again. But Maria kept pushing. She contacted a former officer, Miguel Tarrant, who had resigned from Brookhaven PD in 2012. Tarrant admitted, in a sworn deposition, that a small group within the department had been running off-the-books narcotics stings with little to no oversight. Officers were paid under the table with seized assets, and Reyes had become increasingly vocal about shutting it down. He wanted out. Said it was getting too dirty. Lieutenant Rowe filed for an internal investigation. The Department of Justice was contacted. By late 2018, the Brookhaven PD faced a federal audit. 3 officers resigned. 2 were indicted for corruption, obstruction of justice, and falsifying evidence. Daniel Reyes's official cause of death was amended from suicide to homicide. Maria filed a wrongful death lawsuit against the department. In 2020, she won a $3.8 million settlement, not that it brought her peace. "They didn't just kill Danny," she said in an interview. "They buried the truth under badge and oath." A memorial now sits near the alleyway where Reyes was found. It reads, "Officer Daniel Reyes, justice delayed is still justice." Maria visits it every October 19th with her children. She tells them the truth. That their father wasn't broken, or weak, or lost. He was brave. And someone didn't want the world to know. The Midnight Auction. For nearly a decade, whispers of a secret event circulated on the darker corners of the internet, an invite-only gathering called the Midnight Auction. It was rumored to be held in various cities under the guise of abandoned warehouse parties or members-only art shows. The stories varied. Some said it was an urban legend. Others insisted it was a real black market auction, where everything from weapons to human trafficking victims were sold to the highest bidder. Most dismissed it as internet horror lore. That was until one man came forward, terrified, disoriented, and barely alive. His name was James Dalton, a 31-year-old computer engineer from Portland, Oregon. He had been missing for 6 days when he stumbled barefoot into a gas station on the outskirts of Boise, Idaho. Dressed in a stained tuxedo shirt and speaking incoherently, he kept repeating the words, "red masks, glass hammers." The bidding. At first, police assumed drugs were involved. But once they identified him, the case took a darker turn. Dalton had no history of drug use, and his last known location, according to his phone GPS, was in downtown Seattle, nearly 500 miles away. In his system were traces of scopolamine, a rare drug known for erasing memory and inducing compliance. He also had a deep laceration on his shoulder in the shape of a jagged, intentional X. When he regained enough composure to speak, his story unraveled into something investigators didn't want to believe, but couldn't ignore. Dalton claimed he had attended an underground party after being invited by a woman he met on a dating app. She had an account with no last name, only the initials SK. They talked for weeks before she asked if he was into exclusive experiences. Curious and flattered, Dalton agreed. She arranged for him to meet her at a bar in Seattle on a Friday night. From there, she took his phone and asked him to wear a blindfold as part of the experience. It was the last thing he remembered clearly. He awoke in a dimly lit room filled with figures in red Venetian masks and formal attire. They spoke in code-like phrases. Latin, French, German. A stage was in the center, covered by thick black curtains. Men and women walked through the crowd with tablets, taking silent bids. According to Dalton, the first items auctioned were rare paintings, exotic pets, and stolen artifacts. Then, the room darkened. The curtain opened. A young woman stood on stage, blindfolded, trembling. They called her Lot 43, Dalton said. She was drugged. Like me. Maybe worse. The bidding began. Dalton didn't know if it was theater, a sick game, or something real, until one masked figure approached him and whispered, "Lot 50. You're next." He panicked and tried to escape but was quickly subdued and injected with something. Everything after that was a blur, screaming, being dragged, then a memory of running through a field before waking up near that gas station. Investigators were skeptical. No clear location. No physical evidence beyond the scars and drug traces. But when they pulled traffic camera footage from Dalton's phone's last ping, they found something chilling. A black SUV matching Dalton's account driving into a gated, supposedly abandoned textile factory just outside of Seattle. The plates were fake. A joint FBI and state task force raided the location. The building had been recently scrubbed, but forensic teams found a hidden sublevel with a makeshift stage, chairs bolted to the concrete, and a room filled with masks and expensive wines. Traces of blood were found on the curtain ropes. One wall had dozens of initials carved into it, many with numbers beside them, like a ledger. Authorities tracked one of the initials, AR-17, to a missing girl named Angela Rojas who disappeared in 2017 from Sacramento. Her case had gone cold, and her disappearance was believed to be a runaway. Now, it was reclassified as an abduction. More victims were linked through the ledger. 27 missing persons cases across 7 states matched initials and dates on the walls. Most of them were minorities, sex workers, or people with mental illness, individuals often dismissed or overlooked by society. The woman known only as SK was never found, though digital forensics revealed the dating profile used to contact Dalton was created using an IP address connected to a luxury condo in Vancouver. By the time the Canadian authorities were notified, the unit was empty. Inside, red masks. And in the closet, a tablet left behind with an encrypted bidding app that was wiped remotely minutes after the door was breached. The media dubbed it the midnight auction after Dalton's account, and for a brief time, it captured national attention. But then the story seemed to fade, as if something, or someone, wanted it buried. No suspects were arrested. No one from the shadowy audience was identified. And the victims, while partially accounted for, were never recovered, alive or dead. James Dalton eventually moved to another country, living under a new identity provided through a victim protection program. In a rare interview conducted under strict security, he said, You think it's all conspiracy until you see the monsters wear tuxedos and smile as they sell a person like art. To this day, the FBI keeps an open file on the case. Unofficially, agents say similar auction patterns have resurfaced in Europe and Asia. But proving it is nearly impossible. They hide in plain sight. Behind masks. Behind money. Behind silence. And somewhere, another auction waits for midnight. The 12th floor confession. The call came into 911 at 2:46 a.m. from the Hotel Chiswell in downtown Chicago. The voice on the line was shaky but calm. Room 1203. There's been a murder, the caller said. I'm the one who did it. I'll wait for the officers. When police arrived minutes later, they found 33-year-old Michael Lorton sitting on the floor beside the bed, wrists bloodied but not life-threatening, with a switchblade beside him. On the bed lay the body of a woman, later identified as Caroline Hastings, a defense attorney known for her work on high-profile criminal cases. She had been stabbed 17 times. There was no struggle in the room. No sign of forced entry. No defensive wounds on Michael's arms. He was cooperative, articulate, and gave a full confession on camera. I killed her because she got him out. She defended a monster, and he walked free. And now he's out there while my sister is in the ground. Investigators initially assumed a clear-cut motive, revenge. But as they dug into the history between Michael, Caroline, and the man he referred to, his story began to unravel into something far more chilling. 5 years earlier, Michael's younger sister, Ellie, had been found dead in a forest preserve in Joliet. She was 19. The primary suspect in the case was a man named Jason Merrick, a janitor at the college Ellie attended, with a known history of stalking behavior. He had been arrested but later acquitted due to lack of physical evidence and the aggressive defense put forward by his attorney, Caroline Hastings. At trial, Caroline tore apart the prosecution's timeline, discredited Ellie's text messages as unreliable, and introduced enough doubt that the jury returned a verdict of not guilty. Merrick walked out free. Michael never forgave her. After the trial, Caroline received death threats, but nothing serious ever came of them, until the night of the murder. Police scoured the crime scene for more evidence. The murder weapon belonged to the hotel, a knife missing from the kitchen service tray found in room 1203. It bore only Michael's prints. There was no sign anyone else had entered or left the room after check-in. But here's where things got strange. Room 1203 had not been booked under Michael's name. It was reserved under the alias Alan Vick, using a prepaid card and an email that didn't trace back to any real person. Surveillance footage showed Caroline entering the hotel alone. Michael wasn't seen entering at all. That prompted detectives to pull all elevator footage from the past 24 hours. Nothing. No sign of him on any camera, no record of his keycard usage. Hotel staff insisted the locks hadn't been tampered with. And then came the forensics report. While Caroline had 17 stab wounds, only one, the one to her heart, was fatal. The rest were post-mortem. That changed everything. If Michael had stabbed her after she was already dead, who killed her? The lead detective, Grace Torvelli, dug deeper into Michael's confession. He claimed he had been waiting in the room when Caroline arrived. But when asked how he got in, he said, "I was invited. The room was open. She was expecting someone. She thought I was him." Him who? The detectives asked. Michael's answer, the man she helped escape justice. Jason Merrick. Now, Merrick had vanished 3 weeks prior, his last known residence abandoned, his car found burned in a remote area. The case had gone cold. No missing persons report had been filed, no one noticed he was gone. When they searched room 1203 again, for the third time, they found something they had missed, a flash drive inside a hollowed-out Gideon Bible. On the drive were 2 files. 1. A PDF of Caroline's trial transcripts. 2. A single audio recording. It began with the soft voice of a woman, Caroline, speaking as if to someone in the room. "I know you hate me. I didn't want him to walk either. But that's what we do, Michael. We fight for the law, not for justice." Then a pause. "I know what he did to her." And then a man's voice, not Michael's. "He said she screamed your name. You want to hear that?" A scuffle. Caroline gasping. And then, silence. The last 30 seconds were the sounds of her breathing slowly stopping. Jason Marek had killed her. Michael arrived after. He confessed because he wanted to be punished. He wanted someone to pay, even if it was him. The guilt, the failure to protect his sister, and the hatred toward Caroline boiled over. When he found her dead, he snapped. The recording was authenticated. Marek's voice matched previous interviews. A warrant was issued for his arrest, but Marek was never found. Some say he fled the country. Others believe he's dead somewhere in the forests of Michigan. A hunter reported finding a severed foot in late 2020, but DNA was inconclusive. Michael was charged with tampering with a crime scene and unlawful possession of a weapon, but was acquitted of murder. He now lives in a psychiatric facility outside Springfield, still haunted by the events of that night. To this day, room 1203 remains permanently closed to the public. Hotel staff call it the cursed floor. Some swear they hear recordings playing in the middle of the night, muffled voices arguing, soft crying, a woman gasping her last breath. Justice was never fully served. The law did its job. But truth, like the killer, slipped away into shadow.